Good afternoon from sacred space at Titania's realm. It's a very hot afternoon. It's just past the noon, 12:05 p.m. on the 1st of March 2025. 2 months gone of the year already. It's just flown past. Want to wish my shaman friend in America, Michelle Citrine, happy birthday, bon anniversaire. And happy birthday to everyone that shares this day, I guess. So I had a wonderful night dancing last night. I met a lovely couple. I was very impressed with them. Very kind and sweet they were. Turns out the husband was also a musician. So yeah, I had a really lovely night and interesting interactions which I've written about on Facebook, but I don't feel like repeating on YouTube. And I'm still processing quite a bit of that. Interesting times. Anyway, not necessarily anything negative, just something I'll be carefully monitoring and observing and studying. So I've decided to read some of the stories, or one I've already read to myself, but I'm going to read it for you because it's quite a powerful story actually. The Dreamfighter and Other Creation Tales by Ted Hughes. I think he was the gentleman that was married to Sylvia Plath, who ultimately she suicided sadly. And but anyway, I don't know the minutiae of what went on in that relationship, but whatever she did have, I've read her poetry. She did struggle with severe depression, very likely complex PTSD. I recognise similar isms in her writing. So she's one of us that didn't survive and have to take a moment for those of us women and men, male survivors of complex PTSD from prejudicial childhoods who, for reasons too numerous and too overwhelming, did not survive into old age. So I actually feel very privileged, sometimes a little bit pissed off at times to be honest, but fair's fair. I'm privileged to still be alive at almost 60, given my childhood, my adolescence, my 30s, my 40s, and even my early 50s. In fact, life has only really just begun to even out. Yes, ironically, at the same time we were slammed with the COVIDian madness, I decided, 1 year post that dreadful surgery that nearly killed me too, to just take the reins back in my life. And I started making jewellery, learning silversmithing, and trying to find some kind of stable ground for myself and some measure of success, even though I haven't sold anything really. It's given me a bit of a confidence boost and taught me that I am capable of learning new skills and new things and being audacious and brave at times and trying things that were beyond my skill set. Showed me how actually ambitious I am, although that doesn't usually get reflected too obviously because I tend to get lost in trauma states. And but having said that, I got a measure of peace from learning more about who I am as a woman and as a soul and as a yeah, as a Jew, as a witch, and as a shaman. And the past year, ironically, while struggling to get accustomed to and recalibrate from the CPAP therapy, that last near death on the 10th and 11th of July has brought my shamanistic attributes, abilities, powers, for want of a better word, to the fore more than ever before, which has also been rather astonishing and hard for me to quantify and get accustomed to. And I noticed some of my writings even today to the uninitiated, the mainstream normie types, would sound quite mad. But if you're of a spiritual bent, or you've had as many near deaths as I have, or you're a shaman, or you're a witch, or you're a magical practitioner, those are the only people that actually vibe with me. And even then, shamans have wars with each other. So I've been under some kind of full-blown attack from someone, not quite sure who, but I have a fairly good idea, that decided that I was a threat to their, I don't know how they could perceive me as a threat, because all they do is go dancing and go home. But anyway, they decided in their distortions that I was a threat, and now it'll all blow back on them, because, as I said in a previous video, I come in with only positivity and courage and resilience and determination to continue my own joyous dance with no malintent directed at anyone. And it's actually quite astonishing how many people are envious even of that much. It's like, it just proves to me how evil the world really has become. But then, of course, I've experienced it a multitude of times, so it hasn't just become that way. It probably always was so, but at the moment, the last few months, it's been amplified like a spotlight's been shone on it, and it's very foolish of other magical practitioners to underestimate me. I don't engage magically in magical warfare, but if I have to, I have to. And as I said, it's a sad state of affairs when it comes to that. But anyway, last night I was very protected. In fact, yesterday I had a writhing anxiety all day. I almost came very close to not going dancing. Got to about 8 o'clock, which is usually my deciding demarcation line. And I thought, no, I'll stay home tonight. I've been too emotional today. It's risky if I'm too anxious and easily triggered and kind of in a state of distress, which I knew wasn't all mine, but she knew that. So it got to 9 o'clock and I needed to wash my hair, because since I've had this wounding on my arm, my hair gets very oily and lank after only about a day or two. It's a sign of weakness in the body that I'm still physically channeling all my resources to healing the arm injury. And but I thought about it. It got to like 9 o'clock, and I thought, right, I wanted to see Tim Bishop, who was playing with the Mike Beale band from 7:30 till 10ish. Wanted to see him and say good day and be there ready for when Ramjack came on at 11. So I decided at 9ish, it was after 9 actually, to jump in the shower, wash my hair quickly and shave my legs, and throw on makeup and put on a nice frock, throw myself out in the world as I do every Friday. So I had to fight through all those energetic obstacles of my own anxieties and picking up vibes, quite frankly. So when I got there, Tim was so happy to see me. I blew him a kiss and he nodded and blew me a kiss back. Oh, he and his wife, they're just such lovely people. You know, it's so nourishing to be surrounded by lovely, kind, nurturing people. And so then I made my way to my usual spot, which is where the seating is, and he reached over and gave me a hug. And you know what? I really needed that hug last night. That hug meant everything. It was just so nourishing and kind and sweet, and also pure and agape, because he's a lovely man who's happily married, and there's no agenda. You know, when he hugs, it was just friendship, and that meant a lot to me. A lot. I thought, oh, tonight is going to be a good night because I've been welcomed and loved and received with deep honour and respect, which is all any woman or man or child can ask for when they go into a space, a public space. So yes, I had a lovely time. I had hugs from some of the regular women there too, which was also lovely and honouring and soul nourishing. And it's funny, you know, because yesterday I was thinking about recent events and how I was kind of felt alienated, and anyway, kind of shuffled off in a way. And I was grieving about it. I mean, why am I grieving about it? It's always been like that in that particular friendship. You know, what am I wanting actually from people after many years, you know? Why am I in a state of distress? I was questioning it myself. But I wrote on Facebook, I made it my bio, intimacy. Something, how did I phrase it? Intimacy. I must be cherished. Alienation is abuse. Words to that effect. I've changed it again because it's like I've got over my little grumpy thing about that. But it is amazing how just that little bit of human connection that is not sexual and it's got no, you know, power play dynamics or no taking control, ownership over you. Just a simple, platonic, sweet hug and connection can ennoble one for the rest of the day and the evening, which is a bit sad, but it's indicative of how isolated I live in my home, alone. And so that one Friday night when I go dancing, when I'm with good, kind people who literally see me and are sweet to me, means everything. It's enough to kick me along for another week or another month or another year. You know, the small things. The small things, people of Earth, count for a lot. Now there was some unpleasantnesses too, you know, it's yin and yang. So there was something, I won't even talk about it because it detracts from the loveliness that I experienced last night. So the soul-eaten ones that were trying to dominate and push me aside and act like they're so precious, you know, gross. But and I won't name them, I don't know their name anyway. But I took note of who feel like they need to invade my energy out of, it's just pure envy. If they had danced in the music scene for 14 years and formed solid friendships and relationships with musicians and singers and people in clubs based on mutual admiration and respect, and also putting in the time and the effort, that they might also have built some kind of a charismatic charge that they don't need to be fucking envious of, because each soul has their own charisma if they know how to tap into it, babies. So, I just find those people just beige darlings. But that's the only nasty thing I'm going to say, because, as I said, there were some astonishing encounters last night, and lovely encounters, and sweetness. So Mama T will focus on the sweetness. Let the rest slough the fuck off. So, let us begin the first story in this book. And it's kind of a parable. He's writing shamanic type parables. And they're quite lovely, actually. So let us begin. Why the owl behaves as it does. When Owl became an owl, the first thing he discovered was that he could see by night. The next thing he discovered was that none of the other birds could. They could see only by day. They knew it was no use trying to see by dark night, so at every grey dusk they closed their eyes and slept until the grey dawn. They had been doing this for so long, they had forgotten what the dark was. Owl thought about this. Then he went to the other birds and said, I know a country where there are farms but no farmers. You may eat when and where you please. There are no guns, no bird scarers, no men. I will take you there if you like. Every day, man, capital M-A-N, killed large numbers of the birds as they were feeding in the fields. They said, this sounds like a safe, peaceful country made for birds. Let us go with Owl. Owl smiled to himself. Good, he said. Now, as we have no passports, we shall have to cross the frontier by night, where no one can see us. We shall leave at dusk and should be there by dawn. When dusk came, Owl led all the birds to a rabbit hole on the hill. Hold each other's hands, he cried. I will lead you. All the rabbits that lived on the hill ran up to see what new game the birds were playing. Owl led the way down into the dark hole. Is this night then? Whispered the linnets in the pitchy darkness of the hole. Said the crows. So this is night. It was so dark down the hole that the birds couldn't even see their own beaks. Sorry, I'm picking up vibes and Just curious to see what's going on. Someone plays a little game with me on Instagram, and it's actually quite comical now. It's reached the part where it's comical, but it's sweet too, so I allow it. There's no need to block and delete just yet. I love how I laugh mischievously about that. You can tell when I really love people, when I tolerate their mischief. I wouldn't tolerate it from most other people, so just saying, there's a real tenderness in my heart for that person. But unfortunately, as time goes on, people have a way of fucking things up, and the Tanya moves on when she is forced to, not because she actually wishes to, but at the moment the signs are all there that it's actually already time to move on. But I'm continuing on with what I came to do, which is to dance and be joyous, live my best life for as long as there is breath in my body, and no harm, no foul to anyone. And that is the nature of my spirit, and as I witnessed yesterday, encouraged, motivated and supported by my gods and angels and fae and ancestors that love me. Actually, even I spoke to my close friend Lynn Sloan yesterday. I spoke to her around 4 o'clock-ish in the afternoon, and I said to her, I haven't felt right today. I might stay home. I'm a bit worried there might be some unpleasantness. She said to me, you go. It's good for you. You go. She knows what I'm like, that I will change my mind sometimes in the last moment, spin on a dime and push myself out there, because it's spiritual, people of Earth. It's not just the physical exercise and enjoyment and the social life and a few little drinky poos and seeing people that I genuinely like and I'm fond of, and the music, but it's also, there's a spiritual component to my work. And when she said that to me, I realised, I thought, well, I'll just see how I feel later on in the evening and see how I go, because I've got to be conscious of prioritising my own body, mind and spirit as I heal myself from my own illness, and not pushing myself too far. I noticed the security manager Richard last night. Our standard patter is I'll see you next week, and he usually replies, see you tomorrow, meaning Saturday, because he always hopes that I'll come both nights. But I noticed he didn't do that last night, so he must have realised that I'm healing myself, and I'm having to carefully parcel out my own energies very, very judiciously, like on a very tight budget, and conserve and preserve my own isness, the business of the isness. There's no business like show business, but I don't get paid, so I have to protect my personal autonomy and authority. Anyway, let us continue. It was so dark down the hole that the birds couldn't even see their own beaks. Each one clung to the wing of the bird in front and followed blindly. Owl led them to and fro in the loops and twists of the hole for about 5 minutes. By that time the birds, who were not at all used to walking, felt as if they had been travelling for hours. Is it much further? Cried the swallows. Oh, our poor little feet. It makes me miss my little pet Charlie, because my friend Charlie, She walked all the time because she very rarely flew. And even in the last few days before she died, she had this strange innovation. Oh, look, it looked almost, to be honest, a bit fucking demonic. I was looking at her like, where are you getting this energy from? Like me, pushing myself against my own illness at times. She was running up and climbing the cage, but in this sort of staccato, kind of frenzied, aggressive kind of motion. I looked at her, I still didn't click on that she was dying. Like, it was awful that I didn't realise. But maybe it's good that I didn't realise, because then I wouldn't have even had those last few days of happiness with her. I would have spent the whole time just off my head, already pre-grieving, as I do sometimes with pets. But anyway, she had this movement, and it was staccato and frenzied and climbing up and then climbing down, and some kind of intense innovations like I have never seen before in any of my pet birds. I thought something not right with this picture, but it didn't click. When she died, I realised, and I was like, so quite frankly, it would have been a pain response as well. So I feel like a very shitty bird mummy indeed, but there was nothing I could do. I tried to get the egg out of her, and I couldn't get it out, unfortunately. So I'm still a bit traumatised by her death, quite frankly. It took me a long time to heal from my dog Beauregard's death, and finally started to find some measure of contentment and peace again, and then boom, Charlie was taken from me, and it's been an intense, just over a month. It's been fucking intense, with lots of spiritual weird attacks as well. So yes, it's probably time that I exorcised and purified and cleansed this house and land again. It needs doing on average every 1 to 2 years. And my friend Ness, who's a singer in Ramjet, advised me to do just that, and it's very sound advice. I'm just at the moment, I'm just tired, and I put a lot of energy in when I exorcise this space, so I'm not quite sure what to do about my fairy corner either. I don't want to exorcise the fae, it's their designated corner, so I might just salt around the edges of it and let them still have their space. I do not want ever to piss off the fae. So it's not a very good exorcism if I'm not pissing off perhaps some of the energies that might actually, have precipitated this. But I don't think it's the fae somehow. I think it's coming from human beings who are spiteful and envious and quite malevolent for whatever reason that motivates them. I have no idea. I've done nothing to anyone, but it is what it is. That's why I know with every confidence that it will blow back on them to the 7th generation, because if you've harmed none, just turned up, did your thing, went home, was gracious to everyone, or at least, circumspect and wary but respectful. If you've actually done nothing nasty to anyone, then someone that uses that kind of magic against someone who's innocent, it will always blow back on them. Always. Anyway, so the little swallow said, "Oh, our poor little feet." At last Owl shouted, "Halt, while I see if it's all clear up ahead." He popped his head out of the rabbit hole and looked around. It was darker than when they had entered the hole a few minutes before. But it was not yet quite night. There was still a pale light in the west. "Here we are," he cried then, "over the border, just as dawn is breaking." And he led the birds out into the open. All the rabbits ran up again and sat, one ear up, one ear down, watching the birds with very puzzled expressions. I do love rabbits. I'd love to have another pet rabbit, but my daughter had a special permit to keep rabbits because she was at that time working as a professional clown, and they won't let you keep rabbits here in Queensland. It's evil, quite frankly. But anyway, we just made me miss my grandson, Ramon the rare rabbit, and his sister Suki. "Is this the new country?" asked the birds, and they crept close together, looking round at the almost dark landscape. "This is it," said Owl, "and that is dawn you can see breaking in the east." The birds had quite lost their bearings in the dark underground, and the landscape was now too dark to recognise as the one they knew so well by day. They believed everything that Owl said. Owl led them off the hill and down towards a farm. "But it seems to be getting darker," said the dove suddenly. "Ah, I am glad you noticed that," said Owl. "That is something I forgot to tell you. In this country, day is darker than dawn." He smiled to himself, but the birds looked at each other in dismay. "But what about the nights?" they cried. "If day is darker than dawn, how dark are the nights?" Owl stopped and looked at them. They couldn't see his face, but they could tell that he was very serious. "Night here," he said, "is so dark, so terribly dark, that it is impossible for a mere bird to survive one glimpse of it. There is only one thing to do if you want to keep alive. You must close your eyes as tight as you can as soon as the dark of the day begins to turn grey. You must keep them closed until I awake you at grey dawn. One peep at the dark and you are dead birds." Sounds a bit familiar, doesn't it? Then, without another word, he led them into the stackyard of the farm. The farm lights were out. The farmer was sleeping. The farm was silent. "Here you are," said Owl, "just as I promised. Now feed." The birds scratched and pecked, but by now it was too dark to see a thing. At last they learned to find the grains by feeling with their feet, but it was slow work. Meanwhile, Owl sat on the corner of the barn overlooking the stackyard. Whenever he felt like it, he dropped down and snatched up a nightingale or a willow warbler. In the pitch dark, the rest of the birds were no wiser. "This is better than rats and mice and beetles," said Owl, as he cleaned the blood from his beak. By the time the first grey light showed in the sky, Al was fuller than he had ever been in his whole life. He gave a shout. "Here comes the grey of dusk! Hurry! Hurry! We must get to our beds and close our eyes before the terrible dark comes." Tumbling over each other and bumping into things, the birds ran towards his voice. When they were all gathered, he led them to a nearby copse, which was full of brambles. "Here is good roosting," said Owl. "I will awaken you at dawn." And so, in the grey of dawn, which Owl had told them was the grey of dusk, the birds closed their eyes. All that bright day they stood in groups under the brambles, their eyes tightly closed. Some of them were too frightened to fall asleep. Not one of them dared to open an eye. "One look at that darkness," Owl had said, "and you were dead birds." Owl dozed happily in the dark hollow of a tree. His trick was working perfectly. He was very pleased with himself. No more mice and rats and beetles for him. At dusk he gave a shout. "Here is dawn," he told the birds. "Back to our feeding." And he led them back to the farm, where everything happened as the night before. In this way, Owl grew fat and contented, while the other birds grew wretched. They grew tired of scraping in the dark stackyard. Sometimes they swallowed a grain, but as often it was a cinder. The farm cocks and hens that picked the stackyard over from end to end all day long had not left much for the birds. And when they fell asleep, they were terrified lest they have a dream, open their eyes without thinking, and catch a glimpse of the deadly darkness. It was a great strain. Owl was continually warning them of the danger. "One peep at that darkness," he kept saying, "and you were dead birds." It's a bit like "Let's Go There, Babies," how Mama T was consistently told that if she didn't accept the COVID vaccinations, she would surely die. And, well, I didn't. I held fast, and when I caught the COVID, it wasn't so bad, fortunately, because that seed had been planted in my mind. You will die, you will die, you will die. So when I finally caught it, every fibre of my body, mind, spirit, every cell came online and fought it like I've never fought so hard before in my entire life for 9 days. Although admittedly, the first 4 days I didn't even know I had it. The first 4 days I was busy making a ring, fighting by making jewellery, hyper innovated like my beautiful Charlie when she was dying. And then I started on day 5 to feel a bit feverish and unwell, and I thought, might just have a little test, and found out I had the COVID. So those 5 days from the time that I knew I had it to the time I drove it out of my body weren't so bad. It was only really day 7, 8 and 9 that were a bit, how's your father? Because I became aware that that thing had its own consciousness. So I fought it spiritually, physically and mentally, and I didn't die. Didn't even need antibiotics or well, it was too late for antivirals by the time I worked out I had the COVID. It was day 4. So you see what happens when people point the bone or plant those seeds of putrescence and negativity, convincing you that you're in the dark and that you're going to die. So use your own wisdom and intuition, people of Earth. Don't listen to the people that might mean well, but they don't know who you are. Remember who you are. Fight for who you are each and every time, my darlings. Each and every time. We're all ultimately going to die of something, somehow, somewhere. It's a given. But don't live as though everything's hopeless. If you must, create your own hope out of your own fucking gravel rash despair, like I've had to since early childhood, which is why I don't suffer fools lightly. Right. If only one little bird had peeped for only 1 second with only one eye, he would have seen that there was no such thing as deadly darkness. Or weren't we taught to be afraid of that as children too? Were we taught, or was it a natural instinct? No, I was actually taught. My family was so vile and abusive. They tried to steal any fucking life force out from under me, including making me afraid of the dark. I'm not afraid of the dark anymore. I've lived in other people's squalid darkness for decades. If I need to, shine my own light so brightly that even blinded I find my way through. Somehow, somewhere, alone if necessary, but always grateful when supported by loving friends and remnant family. Just saying, we're herd animals and we need our herd, we need our tribe. Good, kind, supportive, soul-nourishing people. Who's this stopped in front of my house rather oddly? Some little girl got out. No idea who she is. Is that my little neighbour? No. Oh, some little girl visiting my neighbours, obviously. Anyway, that was a bit odd. They just stopped on the corner. It's a very, very expensive modern day Mustang. I'm not impressed by cars. They rot and rust and end up broken down like everything else. But that was odd. That was a bit odd, people of Earth. Interrupting my story. Right. He would have seen the sun and the countryside he knew so well, meaning the little bird that might have dared to open his eyes. But Al made sure that none ever did. Dreadful, just dreadful. The birds grew thin. Their feathers began to fall out. Their feet ached with stumbling about in the darkness, and their wings ached with never being used. They did not like the new country. They complained among themselves. At last, one dusk, when Owl awoke them with his usual cry, "Dawn!" they all went up to him and told him they could stand it no longer. "Please lead us back to our own country," said the birds. Owl was worried. He wanted to keep the birds in his power. He didn't want to go back to eating rats, mice, and beetles. Then he had an idea. "Yes," he said, "you are right. This is a fine country and not dangerous. But, as you say, it is hard to make a living here. Let us find the hole by which we came and return to our own country." He led them up to the rabbit warren on the hill. It was almost dark. "Here are the birds playing that game again," said the rabbits, and they all ran up to stare. Bystanders. There's always bystanders. "Now," said Owl to the birds, "it was one of these holes, but just one I can't remember. Can any of you remember?" "I think it might have been this one," said Cuckoo. "Or perhaps this one," said Jenny Wren. "Let us try them all," said Owl. Most of the birds didn't dare enter the holes lest they got lost. The ones that did were soon up again, saying, "This one comes out here, and this one comes out here." Owl pretended to be distressed. "We have lost our way back, and it is all my fault. Oh dear," he cried. Then he made his voice sound very brave as he said, "As we are here for good, let us make the best of it." And he led them down to the stackyard for the night's feeding. So it went on for almost a year. At last the birds decided they had had enough. They were too unhappy to go on living. "This is no life whatsoever," they said to each other. "Let us all die bravely and at once," said Robin, "rather than go on dying slowly in this miserable way." I know how we feel sometimes. Been there. "We will do that," cried the stormcocks. "Let us all die bravely together rather than live like this." "But how?" said little gold-crested wren. "How can we die?" "Let us open our eyes," said Robin, "to the deadly darkness. Owl said that will kill us all." The unhappy birds went out with Owl that night for the last time. He led them to the stackyard as usual and took up his post. But instead of trying to find food, the birds all sat down together in a big close group in the middle of the yard. They had decided what to do. But Owl knew nothing of it. He stared down. Softly, the birds began to sing their old songs. "What's the matter with you?" cried Owl. "You'll starve if you don't eat." But the birds took no notice of him. They went on singing in their thin, hungry voices. It was a long time since they had sung. Now they sang very low and very sadly. It was a bright night with a full moon, but Owl couldn't catch a single one of those birds. They were pressed far too closely, one against another. He couldn't even pick one from the edge of the group, and they sang all night long. By dawn, Owl was furious. "Dusk!" he cried. "Back to the copse! Here comes the deadly dark!" He was very hungry, but he knew what he would do. He would sneak down on them by broad day when they were standing under the brambles with their eyes tight shut. Then he would eat his fill. He would have a song thrush, a yellow hammer, a green finch, and 5 blue tits. "Where are you going?" he cried. Instead of following him back to the copse, the birds had turned up the hill. Following the rising ground, they came at last to the very top. All around them lay the dark landscape. They gathered under the 3 elm trees there and faced the first grey line that was showing in the east. Then, once more, they began to sing their old songs. 12:57 p.m. There you are, my darling. Just saying. You have to laugh. It's a weird little game. I don't know what the point of it is, but not my monkey, not my circus, am I right? Soon the deadly darkness would begin to spread through the sky, or so they thought. They stared into the brightening dawn and sang, holding their eyes as wide as they could to catch the first rays of deadly darkness. Oh, they were so tired of their lives. To die like this was better than to live as they had been doing, going nowhere but where Owl led them, always in the darkness, scraping their feet raw for a few grains. They sang and stared into the dawn. Every moment they expected the first killing ray of black to shoot out of the bright east. At the edge of the field, Owl was beating his head with his wings. He knew what the result would be. In a few minutes, the sun would rise and the birds would recognize the landscape round them. "Come home," he cried. "You sillies, you'll all be killed dead as stones. Come home and close your eyes." But the birds had no more interest in anything that Owl said. They only wanted to die. Slowly, the sun put its burning red edge into the sky. Lark gave a shriek. He sprang up into the air. "It's the sun," he cried. "It's real day." Slowly, the sun rose. As it rose, the birds flew up into the branches of the elms, dancing on the twigs and singing till their heads rang. "It's the sun," they sang. "It's real day." From under a blackthorn bush at the field's edge, Owl stared in rage. Then he ducked his head and flew away down the hedge, low over the ground. Even so, the birds saw him. "He tricked us," they cried. "And there he goes! There goes the trickster!" In a shouting mob, all the birds flocked after Owl. All the way back to his tree, they beat him with their wings and pulled out his feathers. He buried himself deep in his hollow tree. The birds flew up into the treetop and sang on. And so it is still. Every morning the birds sing, and the owl flies back to his dark hole. When the birds see him, they mob him, remembering his trick. He dare come out only at night to scrape a bare living on rats, mice and beetles. Probably here in Australia a few lizards and the occasional snake as well. So there is that, people of Earth. There is that. Right, I'm in the mood to keep reading. It's that was the first story. We'll just I think we'll just move by the book in a normal order. Because they're quite delightful, and you know, Mama T has time. What else could I be doing with my life? I'm making love to a beautiful man who adores, values and cherishes me, but that hasn't manifested in my life, and I'm not settling for fools, knaves, tricksters, liars, playboys, cheaters, fakes. Sad but true. But I'm loving my friends who are kind to me, even though the majority of them are married, and the few single ones I'm not actually interested in, to their chagrin. And it is what it is, people of Earth. It's why I am the way I am. I'm a shaman and complex PTSD trauma survivor who died too many times in this incarnation. So I'm not willing to risk my heart and soul on anyone that doesn't have my back, my front and my sides, and hold me in great honour and truest, deepest love. I don't have the mental space left to, or the heart or the soul to preserve any kind of relationships that are not soul nourishing and kind and protective. Life is too fucking short. I'm old now, and I wasted eons on idiots, thinking somehow if I just loved enough, they might actually love me back. And that was never going to happen, as those people were profoundly damaged or distorted or evil or whatever their fucking deal was. And I don't want to ever go through that ever again. It's even miraculous that I allowed myself to love ever again, given what I know about humans and owls and birds being forced to close their eyes to the darkness when really they were always in and of the light. And the sun shines after every dark storm, and life goes on, people of Earth. And the right man for me will love me so completely and devotedly and honouringly, without games, without malevolence, certainly would choose me of his own heart, mind, body and spirit. And until I meet that person, my healer friend yesterday saying the next paradigm, maybe that is. I have to wait for the next dimension. And I'm okay with that. I am. I'm done with human beings being cruel and sadistic and shallow and callow and false, when all I did was stupidly, foolishly, naively at times, trust and love. That woman from last night wants me to knock down my walls. My close friend, if I told her the story from last night, would cry with laughter rolling on the floor. How many people over the years have wanted me to take down my walls to my detriment, causing my almost death? So no, the walls stay up, and you will love me even as a warrior goddess, fully fucking armoured, dragging my sword behind me with my corsetry, although I still need to dry clean my stuff. You will love me as I am, and if you can't love me as I am, go on your way with grace and dignity and aplomb, and let me carry on with my way, which works for me. Doesn't make sense to other ordinary mortals who haven't had the constant, repetitive life experiences with lackluster curs, who are dangerous and soul-destroying and destructive and evil. I only keep good people in my life now. And how do I know they are good? Because they've been consistently showing me, even my friend with his little trickster little game, devotion and consistency and interest and what I hope is genuine care and respect. And when that's not served up at the table anymore, and it turns bitter and rancid and fetid, and I have to spit it out, as has often happened in my past friendships and or love affairs. When it turns to shit, Mama T's quite capable of getting up and finding a new table. Sometimes I have to eat alone for eons, people of Earth, and that too is okay. Anyway, end of rant, because I'm happy today. Can you see that I'm happy? Have a look at this, my darling ones. Mama T, I didn't want to put on a bra today actually, but I did. Hate bras. But anyway, they're all in the wash, all my white bras. So Mama T is Viva Mexico, Viva la Revolucion. This gringa done all indigenous with my Native American feathers and my Kalaka skulls, and wow, that's how you know Mama's happy. Happy, people of Earth. I'm of the earth, I'm from the earth. Sometimes I'm a bit through the earth. I'm an earthling, I'm a daughter of the gods, but I'm very much an earthling. So I'm real most of the time. Some people find that a bit confronting too. Anyway, met a lovely young couple last night. I told you that earlier, didn't I? And he asked me, he said, why are you all done up like a Native American? I said, because I'm a Jew. How did I put it? He was quite astonished. I said, because I'm a white honky Jewish witch shaman. Really, he said? Say that again. And then he told his wife, she came from Serbia, lovely woman. Her name was Nina. She kept bowing to me and doing this and really like obsequiously bowing. It was a bit odd. I said, my darling, you must never be submissive to any other mortal. She looked at me and smiled, and then her husband looked at me, and then he looked at her and he said, yes, she's quite right. But it was very unusual. It was an unusual encounter actually. Lovely, lovely unusual. Anyway, so he tells his wife Nina that I just said that I'm a white honky Jewish witch shaman. She looked at me quite astonished too. And he said, are you really Jewish? Because people often ask me this, even in the Jewish community, because of my Polish looking face, although this face is equally Irish, English and Scottish too. But anyway, are you really Jewish? He said. I said, I am at my core. I said, I was a very religious Jew for about 30 years. What? He said. What? And I said, truly, very, very dedicated I was. He said, oh, I lived in Elstonwick. Were you ultra-Orthodox? He said, did you wear denim skirts? And did you have to wear the special outfit? I said, oh, no. I was not that kind of a Jew. What kind of a Jew were you? He says. It's hard for non-Jewish people to wrap their head around that there are different streams in Judaism. I said, I'm a progressive Jew, a reform Jew, a liberal Jew. What does that mean? He said. I said, oh, well, in my branch of Judaism, I'm equal to any man, and I sit side by side the men in the temple, and I wear a talit, a prayer shawl, and I read from the Torah, and I say the blessings before and after, the same as any man, and equal, and any man thinks different. Fuck that shit, I said. Anyway, his wife saw me do this, and she burst out laughing, Anyway, his name was Matt. Matt said, what, so you didn't wear the long denim skirts that I remember all the women wearing in Elstonwick? And I said, no, No wigs, no long denim skirts. I said, that's not the lifestyle for me. It works for those women in that culture, how they're brought up, but it's not how I conduct my life. Darling, I said, I'm too anarchistic. And he threw his head back. I said, also, I said, I would never want to be barefoot and pregnant year in, year out for years and years and years like those women do in that sect. I said, it's too much to ask of any woman, actually. And he threw his head back, barefoot and pregnant with denim skirts. Like, he actually kind of got the humour behind it, the angst and the humour. So I knew he had been around ultra-Orthodox people, and it's an astonishing lifestyle. It's not something I would choose, but it works for them. They feel safe and keeping the traditions alive, and some of them have loving husbands who treat them like queens, so it works for them. Didn't work for me, but ironically, I did go through an Orthodox conversion in 1994. I too could have had the denim skirts and the shaitel and a baby in my belly every year for 10 years or 15 years until my uterus fell out of me, which it did actually do that when I was 42. So just as well I didn't have that lifestyle. My uterus would not have lasted as long as it did. But anyway, all jokes aside and all horror campaigns aside, it was delightful meeting someone that actually understood. He said, so you really are a Jew? I said, was practicing, very religious, devout Jew. Yes. What are you now, Tanya? I said, now I'm a shaman, but I'm actually still a Jew in my heart. But shh, don't tell them. Dancing on the holy Shabbat and Friday nights as I do, living wild and free. Excuse me. Communing with the angels as I do, my weird shamanic ways, calling them in when necessary. Only a Jew can do that and get away with it. Well, maybe devout Christians too, but as it used to say in front of our ark in the temple when we used to go to services, know before whom you stand. And Mama T takes her spirituality and her fading out religiosity quite serious. Just wondering why my eagle feathers all frayed. That'll be from the wild dancing last night. Anyway. Right. Let us begin the next story. How the whale became. Now God had a little back garden. In this garden he grew carrots, onions, beans, and whatever else he needed for his dinner. It was a fine little garden. The plants were in neat rows and a tidy fence kept out the animals. God was pleased with it. One day, as he was weeding the carrots, he saw a strange thing between the rows. It was no more than an inch long and it was black. It was like a black, shiny bean. At one end, it had a little root going into the ground. That's very odd, said God. I've never seen one of these before. I wonder what it will grow into. So he left it growing. Next day, as he was gardening, He remembered the little shiny black thing. He went to see how it was getting on. He was surprised. During the night, it had doubled its length. It was now 2 inches long, like a shiny black egg. Every day God went to look at it, and every day it was bigger. Every morning, in fact, it was just twice as long as it had been the morning before. When it was 6 feet long, God said, "It's getting too big. I must pull it up and cook it." But he left it a day. Next day it was 12 feet long and far too big to go into any of God's pans. God stood scratching his head and looking at it. Already it had crushed most of his carrots out of sight. If it went on growing at this rate, it would soon be pushing his house over. Suddenly, as he looked at it, it opened an eye and looked at him. God was amazed. The eye was quite small and round. It was near the thickest end and farthest from the root. He walked round to the other side, and there was another eye, also looking at him. "Well," said God, "and how do you do?" The round eye blinked, and the smooth glossy skin under it wrinkled slightly as if the thing was smiling. But there was no mouth, so God wasn't sure. Next morning, God rose early and went out into his garden. Sure enough, during the night, his new black plant with eyes had doubled its length again. It had pushed down part of his fence so that its head was sticking out into the road, one eye looking up at him, one down. Its side was pressed against the kitchen wall. God walked round to its front and looked it in the eye. "You are too big," he said sternly. "Please stop growing before you push my house down." To his surprise, the plant opened a mouth, a long slit of a mouth which ran back on either side under the eyes. "I can't," said the mouth. God didn't know what to say. At last he said, "Well then, can you tell me what sort of a thing you are? Do you know?" "I," said the thing, "am whalewort. You have heard of eggplant and buckwheat and dog daisy. Well, I am whalewort." There was nothing God could do about that. By next morning, Wellwort stretched right across the road, and his side had pushed the kitchen wall into the kitchen. He was now longer and fatter than a bus. When God saw this, he called the creatures together. "Here's a strange thing," he said. "Look at it. What are we going to do with it?" The creatures walked around Wellwort, looking at him. His skin was so shiny they could see their faces in it. "Leave it," suggested Ostrich, "and wait till it dies down." "But it might go on growing," said God, "until it covers the whole earth. We shall have to live on its back. Think of that." "I suggest," said Mouse, "that we throw it into the sea." God thought. "No," he said at last, "that's too severe. Let's just leave it for a few days." After 3 more days, God's house was completely flat, and Wellwort was as long as a street. "Now," said Mouse, "it is too late to throw it into the sea. Wellwort is too big to move." But God fastened long, thick ropes round him and called up all the creatures to help haul on the ends. "Hey!" cried Wellwort. "Leave me alone!" "You are going into the sea," cried Mouse, "and it serves you right, taking up all the space." "But I'm happy," cried Wellwort again. "I'm happy just lying here." "Leave me and let me sleep. I was made just to lie and sleep." "So was I, Pippins, but I'm awake now. Although only 4 hours sleep last night. I'm a bit haggard, could do with some sleep, but that will come later." "Into the sea," cried Mouse. "No," cried Wellwort. "Into the sea," cried all the creatures, and they hauled on the ropes. With a great groan, Wellwort's root came out of the ground. He began to thrash and twist, beating down houses and trees with his long root, as the creatures dragged him willy-nilly through the countryside. At last they got him to the top of a high cliff. With a great shout, they rolled him over the edge and into the sea. "Help! Help!" cried Wellwort. "I shall drown. Please let me come on land where I can sleep." "Not until you're smaller," shouted God. "Then you can come back." "But how am I to get smaller?" wept Wellwort as he rolled to and fro in the sea. "Please show me how to get smaller so that I can live on land." God bent down from the high cliff and poked Wellwort on the top of his head with his finger. "Ow!" cried Wellwort. "What was that for? You've made a hole. Water will come in." "No, it won't," said God. but some of you will come out. Now, just you start blowing some of yourself out through that hole. The whalewort blew and a high jet of spray shot up out of the hole that God had made. Now, go on blowing, said God. Whalewort blew and blew. Soon he was quite a bit smaller, as he shrunk. His skin that had been so tight and glossy became covered with tiny wrinkles. At last God said to him, when you're as small as a cucumber, just give a shout. Then you can come back into my garden. But until then, you shall stay in the sea. And God walked away with all his creatures, leaving whalewort rolling and blowing in the sea. Soon whalewort was down to the size of a bus. But blowing was hard work, and by this time he felt like asleep. He took a deep breath and sank down to the bottom of the sea for a sleep. Above all, he loved to sleep. When he awoke, he gave a roar of dismay. While he was asleep, he had grown back to the length of a street and the fatness of a ship with 2 funnels. He rose to the surface as fast as he could and began to blow. Soon he was back down to the size of a lorry, but soon too he felt like another sleep. He took a deep breath and sank to the bottom. When he awoke, he was back to the length of a street. This went on for years. It is still going on. As fast as whalewort shrinks with blowing, he grows with sleeping. Sometimes, when he is feeling very strong, he gets himself down to the size of a motor car. But always, before he gets himself down to the size of a cucumber, he remembers how nice it is to sleep. When he wakes, he has grown again. He longs to come back on land and sleep in the sun with his root in the earth. But instead of that, he must roll and blow out on the wild sea. And until he is allowed to come back on land, the creatures call him just Whale. The end. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. There's lots more stories and they're so enjoyable. We'll continue this video perhaps tomorrow, perhaps later on today. See how I feel. More likely tomorrow, I think. Mama T needs to sleep after her wild dance and her soul-nourishing, interesting connections with people, and everything Zen, baby, everything Zen. So love to you all. Have a beautiful day wherever you are in the space-time continuum, either here on planet Earth or wherever our videos or messages reach into the deepest reaches of space. And I bid you goodbye and take good care and be of good cheer. And remember Mama T's motto, gifted to her by 2 doctor friends from my Jewish community many years ago who could see that I was suffering immensely and very, very much struggling even back then, to never, ever, ever let the bastards grind you, me, us down.